Hi friends, I am Julia and I am here today with some reading comprehension problems to help you prepare for the GMAT verbal section. Today's topic is structure questions in reading comp. We are going to work through a passage and then do 3 example questions. Let's get started. Here is our passage. For centuries, the commonly held belief was that Viking navigation relied primarily on rudimentary techniques such as dead reckoning and coastal landmarks. According to this traditional view, Viking sailors lacked the sophisticated tools necessary to navigate accurately across open water. However, recent research suggests that the Vikings may have used a more advanced method, sunstones or Iceland spar crystals, to locate the sun's position even on cloudy days. So here's this commonly held belief that Viking navigation was pretty basic, but there is now some evidence to think that they had access to more sophisticated navigation techniques. The sunstone hypothesis, first proposed in 1967 by Thorkild Ramskau, gained traction when archaeologists found references to such stones in Norse sagas and medieval texts. Further scientific analysis has demonstrated that Iceland spar crystals have the ability to polarize light, allowing sailors to detect the sun's location with remarkable precision. This discovery challenges the notion that Viking navigation was primitive, suggesting instead that they employed an ingenious optical tool. Here is this hypothesis that they have used this crystal that can polarize light to detect the sun's location, and they were not just relying on the previously assumed basic techniques. Yet, skepticism remains. Some scholars argue that while the sunstone method was theoretically possible, there is little direct archaeological evidence confirming its widespread use. The only artifact resembling a sunstone was discovered in a 16th century shipwreck, centuries after the Viking era. Additionally, even if Vikings had access to sunstones, their effectiveness in practical open sea conditions remains uncertain. So skeptics are saying the only similar crystal that we found was in a shipwreck that happened way after the Viking era. So there's no artifacts that support this, and even if there was, how effective these would work on the open seas is up for debate. Thus, the debate over Viking navigation exemplifies the broader challenge of interpreting historical technological capabilities. While the sunstone hypothesis offers a compelling explanation, the absence of definitive proof means that Viking navigational techniques remain at least partially a mystery. Future discoveries may yet tip the scales in favor of one perspective or the other. We still don't know what's going on, even though this is an interesting idea. We'll have to wait for more information to see whether the skeptics or the sunstone hypothesis folks are more correct in their assessment. Let's look at some questions. I have done a little paragraph summary just because I want to show you the question on one side and the passage on the other, but it's a little bit long and I think it's too hard to read that way. So we've done a paragraph summary since we're doing structure questions. That should help us out quite a bit. Question 1. Which of the following best describes the structure of the passage? A. A historical event is described, followed by an argument for its significance. The passage isn't really discussing a historical event and its significance. It's discussing a debate over whether the Vikings used basic navigation methods or this newly suggested, more impressive navigation method. B, a traditional view is presented. That sounds good. Challenged by an alternative theory. Yes. And then both perspectives are evaluated. Yes. I would say that's pretty good. C, a scientific experiment is outlined, followed by an explanation of its implications. There isn't a scientific experiment in this one, so that one doesn't fit. D, a problem is introduced, followed by several proposed solutions. The passage does not present a problem. And even if it did, it's not really multiple solutions, just a debate over whether one hypothesis is valid or not. And E, two competing hypotheses are introduced with the author arguing in favor of one. The author very deliberately does not argue in favor of one. So E does not work either. So I'm thinking B. Excellent. Next question. The relationship between the first and second paragraphs is best described as which of the following? So let's look at our first and second paragraphs. A, the first paragraph presents a hypothesis and the second disproves it. No, the second paragraph supports the hypothesis introduced at the end of the first paragraph. B, the first paragraph describes a scientific theory and the second critiques it. This is also opposite. The second paragraph supports an alternative theory, but it doesn't critique the first theory. C, the first paragraph presents a controversy and the second resolves it. There's no controversy. D, the first paragraph outlines a traditional view and the second introduces an alternative supported by evidence. Yes, the first paragraph outlines a traditional view that the Vikings used very rudimentary navigation techniques. And the second introduces an alternative theory, the sunstone hypothesis, and it is supported by some evidence. E, the first paragraph recounts a historical event and the second elaborates on its significance. The first paragraph doesn't really recount a historical event. The second paragraph definitely does not elaborate on the significance of the historical event. They're talking about a historical concept, navigation in the Viking era. So I would say D. Excellent. One more question. Question 3. Which of the following best describes the relationship between the second and the third paragraphs of the passage? So, second and third are these two. A, the second paragraph outlines a theory, and the third paragraph provides conclusive archaeological evidence to support it. The third paragraph does not support the second paragraph. B, the second paragraph explains a historical method, and the third contrasts it with a more advanced modern technique. No. Yeah, the third paragraph does not introduce a more advanced modern technique. C, the second paragraph provides a possible explanation that challenges an earlier belief. Okay. While the third introduces reasons to question the reliability or scope of that explanation. That sounds pretty accurate. D, the second paragraph evaluates competing hypotheses, and the third offers a resolution based on available evidence. No, the second paragraph introduces a hypothesis, and the third debates whether that hypothesis is very viable. And E, the second paragraph refutes a prior claim, okay, while the third reaffirms it by pointing to gaps in the newer theory. The third paragraph doesn't really reaffirm the original belief that the Vikings used like rudimentary navigation techniques. It really just points out some reasons why the sunstone hypothesis might not be the case. So I'm thinking C. Perfect. As you can see, having a good idea of the rough outline of each paragraph can really help match the structure questions, because then you can go piece by piece. And if you find something that doesn't fit at any point, then you can eliminate that answer. Structure questions are a little different from other reading comp questions, so getting used to them can take some practice. Even if they do seem difficult, the more you read and learn to look for structural markers, the better you will get at it. Best of luck!